Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to my review of not one, but two Yema Superman. Supermans? Supermen? This is not my first encounter with the brand though. I reviewed their Navy graph back in 2020 and I really liked it. Then I reviewed their first LED model in 2021, and earlier on this year I borrowed Mr. P's Navy graph GMT for a three-way Fight Club battle. It won that particular battle, by the way. This is, however, my first encounter with their Superman range of watches, which is really their core range and the watches they are best known for today, I think. And I guess I'm starting at the very top by having a look at both size variants of their, currently on pre-order, shipping at the end of the month, Superman GMT 500 model. One is 39, one is 41 millimeters. Now that is clearly only 2 millimeters difference in diameter between the two watches, which in most other items would be nothing. But in a watch, it can be the difference between this and this. Now you saw the pop-up. This video is sponsored by Yema. I will therefore leave a link to the GMT 500 listing on the Yema website in the description of the video so you can check it out for yourself. But a sponsored video is not a free ride for a watch. I think there's a lot to like here. There are a few things though I'm not keen on. So today, 5 things I like, 5 things I don't like about the Yema Superman GMT. Let's flip the camera and get on with it. Alright, let's crack on. Packaging's fine. It's a small box containing a small perforated travel clamshell in brown leather. It's a nice cushion and there is a small instruction manual, which of course I have no intention of reading whatsoever. 2-year international warranty with these. Yema also claim to have 24/7 chat capabilities via their website, so that is your first port of call if you do need help with your warranty. And there they are then. They do 3 different colour pairings of this GMT 500. There's a Batman pair, a Pepsi pair, and this black and white pairing, which is what they sent me. These two are production samples, by the way. As such, they are unnumbered, but the full production units will be numbered. I get to keep one of them. I have to send the other one back to France. So 2 sizes, 3 different colours, 200 of each. I'm guessing that's 1200 watches altogether then. So I've got plenty of comparative shots of these 2 different sizes, and for our mutual benefit, I'm going to pop in the top left corner of the screen whether you're looking at the 39 or the 41, although it should be fairly obvious. Like I said, 2mm means nothing on a car, but it means quite a lot on a watch. So starting with the small one then, it is 39mm in diameter, has a thickness of exactly 14mm, lug tip to lug tip is 48. Not small for a smaller than average watch. Vintage style though, I guess they do have quite long lugs. Lug width is 19mm. Interesting that the smaller version is 19, the bigger one is 20 as you'll see. I guess Yema had a specific look in mind for this and a specific set of proportions therefore, hence why they went with 19 on the little guy. The bracelet does taper all the way down to under 16 at the clasp, by the way. In terms of weight, 134 grams, sized up for my 7-inch wrist. And as regards the larger watch, well, you know 2 of the dimensions already, 41mm diameter and identical 14mm thick, which is actually okay considering these are claimed to be 500 meters water resistant. Lug to lug is longer at 49.5, 20mm lug width as noted, and exactly 10 grams heavier at 144. Case finish is pretty simple. It's all brushed throughout. Drilled lugs will help you if you are going to be swapping this bracelet out for leather or rubber. More on that later. But as you can see, the case is quite flat. There is a little bit of downturn towards the edge of the lugs, but it's a retro style watch, so don't expect too much curvature. The bezel is semi-coin edge and has that unique locking mechanism attached to the crown mechanism. The crown itself is a 6mm, high polish with a Yema Y on the tip. And what a piece of sapphire. It's a big old vintage style domed sapphire crystal to make it look like acrylic. And the bezel insert is also sapphire, this time to make it look like Bakelite. There's heaps of distortion from the crystal. Again, that is par for the course with this style of vintage reissue. Now the bracelet is like a flat Jubilee if you see what I mean. 5 links with links 2 and 4 being high polished, but it's much flatter than a regular Jubilee. As such, they only use push pins to hold it all together. If they'd have used screws, they would have had to have been bloody small screws, so perhaps push pins are the better option in this case. The clasp appears to be a range carryover. It's certainly the same one that I've seen on both Navy graphs that I've looked at. 4 holes of micro adjust, security fold over, only a pressed upper, but it's a nicely milled scissor featuring Maison Horlogère Française Fondée à 1948, something which modern Yema is clearly very proud of. Another thing they are very proud of is the in-house caliber, the Yema 3000, which you can't currently see because of that rather fine-looking caseback. I do like the heraldic shield in the middle. As I said, production units are going to be individually numbered from a run of 200. It's a really solid feeling caseback as well, which is good considering 500 meters of water resistance. But using the power of a caseback removal tool, we can all have a good look at that 3000. 29 joules, hacking and hand winding, automatic, roughly 40-hour power reserve, high beat 4 Hz, and a heap of perlage work pretty much everywhere. And in case you've forgotten, there's another reminder on the rotor that their Maison Horlogère was founded in 1948 in France. There were a few scratch marks in the movement holder though, as you can see here. At least the movement holder was metal though, unlike the Navy Graph, which only had a plastic one. Alright, let's go straight to the wrist shots, and plenty of them. If you're a regular on this channel, you knew before you even clicked on the video which of these two watches is more my personal cup of tea. I would always tend to go a little smaller than 40 rather than a little larger than 40. So yeah, the 39 will be staying in Sydney and the 41 will be packed off back to France. I prefer the smaller size, I prefer the lighter weight that comes with a smaller size, I prefer the shorter lug-to-lug length, and visually at least, I prefer that smaller lug width. 14mm is probably as tall as I would want to go in this case, and quite a lot of the weight is situated in the watch head rather than the bracelet because the bracelet's thin. This is more pronounced on the larger of the two watches, but it is still noticeable on this 39. Now the 41 reminds me a lot of the Rolex Explorer 2. If you've ever had the pleasure of wearing one of those, it's a big watch head with quite a small bracelet and clasp on it, and that's the vibe that I get from this one also. With the bracelet tapering down to less than 16, it's a 46 if you include the crown, all the way down to 16. I mean, that's not a ridiculous level of taper. It's still very wearable, and the bigger watch has a whole different presence about it, I think, to the little one. But it definitely feels a bit more top heavy because the bracelet isn't any larger to balance out the extra size and the extra weight. You can see from the pocket shots that I've chosen to wear both watches low and loose. For me personally, a smaller watch is much more comfortable below the knuckle than a larger one, or should that be less uncomfortable, but that's just me. There are options other than this bracelet anyway, as will be discussed. But that's the basics done. What do I like today then, and what do I not like as much? Well, let's start with the positives before dishing the dirt a bit later on. First thing I like is the looks. I think this is a good looking watch. There are a number of different colour variants available, but I think this black and white's the best of them. It's obviously a vintage design. The Superman dates back to the 60s, but the black and white with just a touch of red, I think gives the thing a modern lift. The handset is distinctly Yema, and along with the indices, is straight off a vintage Superman. There's a colour matched date wheel at 3, just a printed frame. The whole dial, by the way, is just printed. Yema Y, Yema logo and Superman name above the pinion, world time automatique, and 500 meters beneath it. The depth rating in red picks out the triangle of the GMT fourth hand and also the red in the paddle tip of the second hand. The smaller watch, the 39, maybe could have done with losing a line or two of text. Personally, I would have deleted world time and automatique and pulled Superman down to sit above the water resistance, but that's just me. The bigger watch clearly has a lot more real estate on the dial, and there's a lot more space, a lot more room to breathe as a consequence. There's also enough space to allow for minute markers all the way around, even sitting to the right of the date window. One final nice touch on both of these watches is that the stem of the GMT hand is painted black. Now set against the black dial, a lot of the time it looks like the red triangular tip is just floating down there amongst the indices. It's such a simple little change, but I don't think I've seen it elsewhere, and it looks really good. The bezel lock is also something I've not seen elsewhere, and I actually quite like it. I thought it was a bit of a weird concept when I first saw it on the Superman when they launched this one a couple of years ago, but having used two of these now, I kind of get it. Obviously, when the crown is unscrewed, it becomes an awkward little piece of metal rattling around. But if you're going to be wearing one of these daily, and I assume you would, you're not going to be unscrewing the crown and the bezel all that often anyway. And when you screw it back down, there's no chance of accidentally changing the time zone you're tracking using the bezel. Bezel action, by the way, is rock solid. 24 click, bi-directional, very robust, very positive, a real standout. Now, the clasp seems to be a carryover from other Yema models that I've looked at. That means that it has the diver's extension as well. I really like it. I think it's a really neat piece of engineering, one of the best diver's extensions I've seen on anything. How many people will actually use it is up for debate, but if a manufacturer is insistent on supplying one of these as standard issue, then this is a good one. There when you need it, discreet and unobtrusive when you don't, which I suspect is going to be most of the time for most people. And I like the fact they've gone for double sapphire. I'll never complain about sapphire crystal with a sapphire bezel insert. I always think it's a good combination. It can look modern or it can look retro depending on how it's done. In this case, it's definitely retro with a big bag of distortion coming thanks to that high domed dial covering crystal. Now there are some legibility issues that come with that, but if you're going to buy this retro reissue style of watch, then it's all part and parcel of the package. It adds, in inverted commas, charm and character. And the last of my 5 positives is the lume. It's pretty good. Sapphire inserts always have their own unique look after dark, and this one is no different. There's enough BGW9 in there to keep things interesting for a while, and enough on the hands to keep things legible for a while after that. But that's enough bonhomie and backslapping. Let's get the knives out. First thing I don't like particularly is the date complication. I just don't think it's all that legible. I appreciate the white numerals on the black background, keeping the whole thing black, white and red, but really it's a bit more grey than black when you look at it close up, and the numerals are set a bit too deep to be properly legible. It's definitely worse on the smaller watch than it is on the larger watch because of the position of the date relative to the doming of the crystal. But when you can't even read the date on the Yema press shots for the watch, it suggests that it's not all that legible, doesn't it? The bracelet is also a bit weird. It's the same bracelet on both sizes as discussed, apart from the end link being 1mm different. It's very slim, which in theory I like, but as the watch head is 14mm thick, maybe the bracelet needed to be a bit thicker and a bit heavier to help balance it out. There's not a lot of lateral flex, but there is quite a bit of twist, and it wears slightly unusually as a consequence. And I don't think the clasp is up to much. It's the same clasp as used to feature on the $300 and something Navy Graph Quartz. Superman GMT is a whole grand more than that watch. I think it deserves a better clasp. Upper section's pressed, and it looks and feels a little bit cheap, a little bit sharp. It's not awful, but it could have been better. No problem, there are other options, including a leather strap and a rubber strap, but the rubber strap is more expensive than the bracelet, which is something I don't think I've ever seen before. It's high quality, again reminding you that the Maison was fondée in 1948, and the clasp is fantastic. It's everything the bracelet clasp is not. It's beautifully machined, nicely finished, very purposeful in its design, even though it doesn't have any on-the-fly adjustment style like a Formex clasp. But like I said, it's more expensive than the bracelet, and because of those long vintage lugs, you can see more of your arm in that gap than you would like to. It's almost no moss levels of gap there, if you know what I mean. And overall, there are just a few too many sharp edges on the case. Sharp edges on the lugs, sharp edges on the crown guards, and when that little bezel lock is screwed in, sharp edges on the underside of the bezel lock. Again, that seems to be the style they've gone for here. It's not a particularly curvaceous case. But when you combine those sharp edges on the case with a thin and twisty bracelet with push pins and the underbuilt clasp, none of it feels particularly luxurious, put it that way. And finally, my 5th complaint, the in-house caliber, the Yema 3000. Yema are clearly very proud of the fact that they manufacture their own movements. They even claim on the listing for this watch that it is powered by optimized components yielding slightly better performance than generic standard grade calibers ETA, Sellita and Miyota, offering a daily rate of plus to minus 10 seconds per day and a 42-hour power reserve. Now they do clarify a little further down, stating that tolerances can be up to a maximum of plus or minus 25 seconds per day, so I put these two on the time grapher. The one on the big watch is doing alright, it's running nicely within tolerances. The one on the smaller watch, yeah, it's certainly not within plus or minus 10 seconds per day, even in this flat on your back default position. So it's a bit of a mixed bag then today for the Superman 500 GMT, and I haven't really talked about price all that much. I mean, I've alluded to it a couple of times, but I haven't flashed it up on screen in giant numerals like I usually do. These are $1,399 on pre-order. Yema always do deals though. Currently they have 10% off and a free strap until the end of the month, but when I tried to apply this discount to this watch, I could only get the free strap and not the discount. $1,400 I think might be pushing it a bit for one of these, to be honest. The Marine Nationale GMT with the same movement was less than $1,000. I'd be much happier recommending this one to you at $1,000 than I would be at 20% more than that. So by all means, email them, ask them if they're doing deals on this one, or perhaps wait until the pre-order period is over. Perhaps they'll start offering discounts on this model at that point. The market is about to be flooded with affordable GMTs with Seiko and Miyota movements in them. And as nice as this Superman is, and it is nice, I think Yema might have to do a little bit of adjusting to take that new competition into account. So there you have it, a cracking looking watch, this one. I definitely prefer the proportions on the smaller of the two case sizes, but then again, I love the extra room on the dial of the bigger one. Either way, it's a watch that I would be happier recommending at $1,000 rather than at the pre-order list price of $1,399. If you have made it this far, then why not check out the other two videos I've made featuring the Navigraph review and Navigraph GMT. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you again in a future video, I hope.